This is Amy. It is December 16th, Friday, 2022. Today I'm reading Chapter 3 of Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse by Jason Breshears. Thousands of books and articles have been published concerning the prophet Nostradamus and his mysterious prophecies. Only one of these books that the author has found actually purports that the French seer dated his predictions. Mario Reading in Nostradamus, The Complete Prophecies for the Future, demonstrates this time index in a neat chronological format, easy to follow. The research of this French translator provides us the exact dates that Nostradamus assigned to his quatrains. The system is quite simple. It is amazing that someone else before him had not already deciphered his dating system. Nostradamus recorded his prophecies in a book called Centuries, not denoting actual 100-year periods, but dividing his predictions into 100 quatrain sections. Mr. Reading believes that much of this content of the centuries refers to many historical events that unfolded prior to the 21st century AD, but that the French seer was essentially an end-time prophet. Mario Reading shows that the number of centuries has no relevance whatsoever in chronologically dating the quatrains, and nor does the number of the quatrains. For all events preceding the 21st century, beginning with the year 2000 AD, but beginning with the 21st century, the quatrains take on a certain pattern and actually identifies the precise year of the fulfillment in the Anno Domini calendar. Thus, the century, the quatrain 16, would refer specifically to 2016 AD, or century 5, quatrain 5. 23 would refer to 2023 AD. These are made-up examples. The century itself has no chronological significance, but the number of the quatrain is the year itself. This is not an untenable theory. Nostradamus claimed that he could have dated all of his prophecies, but neglected to do this for reasons only known to him. Further, the Anno Domini dating system was the established calendar in his time, and if he dated the future events, even in a code, it would have been using this system. If this theory is true, and can be demonstrated, then it raises an interesting point not mentioned by Mario Reading. The very old belief that prophecies are generally not to be understood until the epoch of their fulfillment. Prophecies of far-off events have no value and are easily forgotten, but are meant to be understood by those generations that are about to suffer the situations in their content. If Mr. Reading is correct, then this implies that for one to understand the future as it will unfold in the 20th century, then one must eliminate all those quatrains that have met fulfillment in the past, so that what remains would be those referring to the 21st century, which would be dated paralleling the number of the quatrain. In considering the predictions of the prophet, we must keep in mind that Nostradamus was also a chronologist. He also acknowledged that his ability did not derive from himself alone. Writing to his son Caesar, he said, "The perfect knowledge of events cannot be acquired without divine inspiration. Since all prophecies, inspiration receives its principal motivating force from God, the Creator." This was written almost 400 years before Oswald Spengler wrote, "The greatest mathematical thinkers, the creative artists of the realm of numbers, have been brought to their decisive mathematical discoveries of their several cultures by a deep religious intuition." Mario Reading's work is not better known because he committed an error fatal to his research. Though he discovered the date index and had a wonderful book published, he also deviated away from his own discovery and applied some quatrains to current events that had nothing to do with the seer's predictions. Many authors writing about the future fell prey to this procedure, seeing in current world events a present reflection of some ancient predictions, when in fact they have no relation. Having wandered away from his own discovery, he thought he found quatrains that pertained to the years 2001 through 2012 AD, when in fact the quatrains he cited were numbered otherwise. The event he had predicted did not transpire, and now, in 2020, his book is largely unknown. Though the author committed this error, this does not negate the validity of his discovery. In fact, with the year 2040 AD, his interpretations of future events based off the corresponding quatrains in his date index are perfect. And remarkably, the future Mario reading sees in the predictions of Nostradamus from 2040 on through 2046 AD mirror exactly what this author published in When the Sun Darkens and in Anunnaki Homeworld. These books are based on extensive astronomical chronologies measuring the orbit of long-period celestial bodies spanning thousands of years of recorded history that Mario reading does not so much as even hint that he is aware of. These are fixed timelines that reveal that our world is going to suffer back-to-back global catastrophes in 2040 and 2046 AD. Mr. Reading makes a legitimate discovery. The date index is real, and it will be shown in this chapter that Nostradamus knew all about these two very terrible years. The conclusion to When the Sun Darkens was that the return of Phoenix in 2040 AD is the subject matter of Revelation 6:12 through 14, better known as the sixth seal of the apocalypse. And I behold, when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her ultimate untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heavens departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. The last visitation of Phoenix was in 1902, when the earth was blanketed in hundreds of millions of tons of dust and mud. Starting in May, also in May, the volcano called Mount Pelée on Martinique exploded, killing all 30,000 people in Saint Pierre, save for one single survivor. Volcanic activity goes hand in hand with Phoenix visitation through history. The sixth seal prophecy involves very specific descriptions of a pole shift, when the outer lithosphere smoothly glides over the mantle and displaces the entire continent, causing oceans to invade coastal lands, extreme seismic disturbances, and volcanism. As seen in the prior chapter, it's believed that Nostradamus named the Phoenix and associated it with the year 1903. It is also known that the coat of arms for the family of Nostradamus was a shield with two solar symbols and the head of a phoenix. Though Nostradamus was no doubt heavily influenced by his Judeo-Christian and Catholic background, these are not enough to explain his prophetic precision. He was a self-proclaimed descendant of the Israelite tribe of Issachar. And interestingly, if this was true or not, the biblical record states that the men of Issachar were the keeper of the times. Employing his date index, Mario Reading claims that Century 2, Quatrain 40, refers clearly to 2040 AD. His translation reads, "A short while after a previous occurrence, a further fierce storm will arise over land and sea. The seaborne cost of this one will be even larger. Fire, animals, it will be even greater. Outrage. Mr. Reading claims that this is the very literal passage that conveys that some powerful destructive storm will follow a similarly destructive but less powerful one in 2040. There seems to be a correlation between the quatrain and the sixth seal disaster. In Revelation, both focusing on the sea. Mario Reading, curiously, does not continue the passage. For the very next quatrain, continue the description of what is to occur in 2040. We now review this connected passage in Eric Cheatham's The Final Prophecies of Nostradamus with Century 2, Quatrain 41. The great star will burn for 7 days, and the cloud will make the sun appear double. The large mastiff will howl all night, and the great pontiff changes his abode. In 2239 BC, the inhabitants of the earth witnessed planet Phoenix for 7 days before the Great Flood, darkening the sun. The cloud reference further hints to cosmic dust. For the reference to the cloud is in singular. Plurality would have denoted mere atmospheric clouds common every day. Some translators prefer to have this passage refer to the appearance of 2 suns, rather than the sun appearing double. Phoenix, approaching from a certain angle, would appear brilliantly, reflecting the sunlight. But the greatest link to the Phoenix pole shift is the statement, the great pontiff changes his abode. It must be remembered that the quatrains are full of astronomical symbols and metaphors. The great pontiff is none other than the sun, which is in a pole shift, alters its course across the skies. It changes its abode. It is not the sun moving, but the earth turning upside down, with crustal slippage, changing terrestrial geography and our vantage point. During the day, the sun will veer off course and the day will turn into night in minutes. And at night, there will be a sudden appearance of a bright sun awakening those lost in sleep. As shown in When the Sun Darkens, the east will be shoved northward, while the west, that's the Americas, will be pushed southward. The epicenter of turning, like an axis, will be the Israeli-Egyptian region. When Graham Hancock published his famous Fingerprints of the Gods, the scientific evidence available at that time in the early 1990s revealed that the reversal of the Earth's magnetic poles was scheduled for about 2030 AD. But since 2006, the magnetic poles have wandered exponentially far from their true poles. It is difficult for scientists to predict such phenomenon when they will not admit the fact that of rogue planetary bodies of immense size as being part of our own solar system that travel highly elliptical orbits that take them way out of the vast Kuiper belt. Nostradamus did not leave so earth-shattering an event within only a couple quatrains. He was much more thorough than that. Several times, the prophet encoded the same event or events that occurred in 1 year but spread throughout 3 or more quatrains in this subject matter that linked them together. Here's an example of Nostradamus' method. In Century 1, Quatrain 43, we read, "Before the coming of the end of an empire, a miraculous event will take place. A field removed the pillar of porphyry, put in place on the gnarled rock." In Century 9, Quatrain 32, we read, "A deep column of fine porphyry is found, inscriptions of the capital under the base, bones, twisted hair, the Roman strength tried. The fleet is stirred at the harbor of Mytilene. In Century 10, Quatrain 93, we read, The new Baroque will go on voyages. The new bark will go on voyages, far and near. They will transfer the empire. Bequiri and Arles will retain the hostages, near where 2 columns of porphyry are found. All 3 of these quatrains appear in different centuries. All 3 mention a column of pillar or column of porphyry. These passages refer to some astonishing archaeological discovery in the future. The reference to bones and twisted hair is no mystery. Archaeologists came across human sacrifices laid beneath ancient foundations and cornerstones of monuments excavated. I would employ Mr. Reading's date index and assign 2 of these quatrains to 2032 AD, which would be before the end of the empire, which will no doubt come with this disaster of 2040. The third quatrain used the columns of porphyry only for a geographical marker, meaning that the events of the quatrain are later than the discovery of the columns. We will not spend time here trying to interpret these quatrains and these that do not seem to be connected with. These were provided in example to show that Nostradamus would use a quatrain to establish a date and then add other quatrains connected to it through subject matter rather than number designation. This allows him to elaborate when he needed to because some of the years would be full of events as opposed to others. The next example of his method provides us absolute proof that Nostradamus knew about planet Phoenix. He describes it, dates its appearance, and even encodes its orbital duration of 138 years, all in the next 4 quatrains. In Century 2, Quatrain 43, we read, during the appearance of the herded star, the 3 great princes will be made enemies. The tremulous peace on earth will be struck from the skies. The Po, the winding Tiber, a serpent on the shore. In Century 5, Quatrain 59, we read, the English chief stays too long at Nimes, towards Spain. Aenobar to the rescue. Many will die through war, started on that day, when a herded star falls in Artois. In Century 6, Quatrain 6, we read, he will appear towards the north, not far from the herded star in Cancer. Susa, Sienne, Boeotia, Eurasia, the great man of Rome will die, the night dispersed. In Century 2, Quatrain 15, we read, a short while before a king is murdered, Castor and Pollux in the ship, a herded star. Public treasure plundered on land and sea. Pisa, Asti, Terraria, and Turin are forbidden territories. The bearded star is a phrase to French seer borrowed from Aristotle's meteorology, referring to a celestial body with a tail that stretches in one direction. In fact, the word comet derives from roots meaning hairy star. These 4 quatrains in all of Nostradamus' writings are the only references to herded stars, thus linking them all to the same event. Other comets are mentioned in his centuries, but they are not described in this fashion. We pay close attention to Century 6, which reads that the great man of Rome will die, which is a code. The great men of Rome in his days, before and after, were pontiffs. The papacy of Rome ruled the European court with an iron fist. The pontiffs of Rome, as seen in Century 241, is a symbol for a sun which changed its abode. This is confirmed as century 6:6 continues, stating that after the death of the great man of Rome, the sun, the night dispersed. As night is the opposite of day, this describes a pole shift caused by the bearded star, which takes peace from the earth and is the reason why the public treasures and their stores are looted. Note, instead of herded star, bearded star is correct pronunciation. The bearded star references are connected by symbols to century 241, which, as we have seen in continuation of century 240, which in Mario Reading's date index is 2040 AD. The reference to Castor and Pollux identifies the time of May, June, and the region of Gemini in the sky at the end of May. At the end of May, the sun is in the house of the twins, according to Robert Graves, scholar of the Grecian antiquities. These 4 bearded star quatrains directly refer to the planet Phoenix and its effect upon the earth. And we have our proof of this, the mathematical code the prophet left to those who would search for it. He cleverly hid in the 138-year orbit of the Phoenix within the quatrains themselves. By adding each century and quatrain, the total is 138. Because these are the only 4 passages in all of his prophecies mentioning a bearded star, then we cannot attribute this to accident. We find more evidence of Nostradamus' chronological genius. He encoded this 138 years in only 4 quatrains. 138 times 4 is 552 years. That's a Phoenix cycle. One could accuse this of being too arbitrary or coincidental, so take this into consideration. Nostradamus dictated his centuries to his secretary, who wrote them all down for publication in 1553 AD. Mario Reading is convinced that this terminal period of the French prophet's message concerning the year 2105 AD, which is exactly 552 years after 1553. Interestingly, the chronological tablets in When the Sun Darkens demonstrates that a 6,000-year countdown began in 3895 BC, and it ends in 2106 AD, exactly 552 years after 1554 AD, when all of Europe was afire with the prediction of Michael Nostradamus, aka Nostradamus. The prophet concealed much more information spread throughout his work concerning 2040 AD. Century 240 dated the event, and the following passage in Century 241 supplemented it. The bearded star passages encoded the identity of the Phoenix and are filled with subject matter that links them to the obscure quatrains that could only be descriptive of the 2040 AD disasters. Before we explore these amazing passages, our attention is turned to one clever date passage hidden by Nostradamus in Century 9, Quatrain 31. We read, "The trembling of the earth at Martera, the 10 islands of St. George have sunk. Drowsy with peace, war will arise at Easter, in the temple abyss opened." Erica Cheatham is an Oxford scholar who has studied written books about Nostradamus and his prophecies. She relates that Martara is 1,000 miles from Britain, inland of St. George. So this must describe a massive earthquake. It is possible that the half of the England that sunk into the Atlantic Ocean will be the southern half, with London disappearing beneath the waters. As readers of When the Sun Darkens will remember, this is also the fate of New York City in 2040 AD, which also lies upon the Atlantic coast. It must also be mentioned here that the English and a war, that it must also be noted here mentioned here that the English and a war are elements found in the bearded star, passage century of 559. This prophecy in century 931 concerns destruction caused by the sea. The bearded star reference in century 243 and 215 refer to rivers, the seashore, the sea, the regions of Pisa, Asti, Terraria, and Turin becoming forbidden, maybe flooded, and they mention Castor and Pollux, the patron gods of the sea and sailors. Our study began with century 2040, which describes ruination by water. But the code of Nostradamus' dating century 931 is so simple it was almost missed. Century 9 added to quatrains 31 is 40, and this satisfied Mario Reading's date index identifying 2040 AD as the date when half of England or the British Isles will sink below the ocean. The pole shift and global cataclysm and current events at that time are found in chronological order in quatrains numbered 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, and 88. However, these quatrains are not in the same century. They are spread throughout the predictions of the prophet, but we can easily see the pattern numerically and link them to 2040 AD, disaster by their content, which is exactly what Nostradamus wanted the interpreter to do. Century 8, quatrain 81 reads, "The new empire in desolation will be changed from the northern pole. From Sicily will come such trouble that it will bother the enterprise tributary to Philip. The new empire is a prophetic reference to the United States of North America, which did not exist in 1554, when Nostradamus wrote down the centuries. He was referring to nations and empires. The prophet clearly identifies them through cultural symbols, geographical descriptions by their leaders, identities, or through clearly understood metaphors. In When the Sun Darkens, we find not only New York destroyed in 2040, but the North American continent is shoved upward, away from the Northern Hemisphere, to occupy the region once known as Mexico, and Central America, which are also shoved southward to become the new South America, but are heavily destroyed as they pass over the equatorial bulge. South America becomes the new Antarctica, while the reverse occurs in the Far East and everything is pushed northwards in the place of Canada, and the U.S. are fragmented and broken lands of ice and rock, formerly of the Arctic. Erica Cheatham, having never reviewed any data on Phoenix or this author's research, believes that this passage refers to a civilization that moves southward. Century 1, quatrain 82 reads, "When even the trees shake mightily, and the south wind seems covered in blood, so many will try to escape that Vienna and all Austria will shake with their passing." The prophet borrows imagery from the book of Revelation. In fact, from the passage concerning Phoenix, the sixth seal, when he writes, "Trees shake mightily," with the biblical text reading, "The fig tree shaken of a mighty wind." The association on the prophet's part was deliberate, linking the sun darkening episode and the moon turning to a blood color with the prediction about the south wind seemed covered in blood. This would indeed be an accurate description, as planet Phoenix will bathe the world in cosmic dust that would blanket the earth as it did in 1902. The word Phoenix, as translated by Robert Graves, means blood red. As found on page 650 of his celebrated The Greek Myths, this is Mario Reading's translation of the quatrain. He assigned this to 2082 AD, adhering to his date indexes. He was unaware that Nostradamus used some quatrains to establish a date and then connected other quatrains through imagery and association to elaborate on certain important centuries. Century 9, quatrain 83 reads, "A great earthquake will totally destroy the packed theater. Air, sky, and earth will be murky and unsettled so that even infidels will call on God and the saints to steer them. In Mario Reading's translations, of course the quake, the ruin of architecture, and the air being murky are all caused by Phoenix, occulting the sun in transit. The language employed here, to steer them, links us back with Castor and Pollux, guiding the ship, or Earth, in a pole shift direction change, and the former terrestrial geographic markers indicating the cardinal directions no longer point out north, east, south, and west. We are unsure how long the planet will wobble before it stabilizes. Before we go to the next passage, we need to revive Erica Cheatham's interpretation of this same Century 9, Quatrain 83 text. The sun, in 20 degrees of Taurus, there will be a great earthquake. The great theater full will be ruined. Darkness and trouble in air, sky, and land. And when they call upon the faithless God and his saints. Quite a difference though the general message remains the same. What is useful to us is the Oxford Scholar's commentary that this passage retains precise astronomical data revealing that the quake and darkness occur in May. Again, it cannot be overstated. Erica Cheatham knows nothing of planetary Phoenix, nor its passing through the inner solar system. Every 138 years in May. Century 1, Quatrain 84 reads, "The moon eclipsed in great gloom. His brother becomes the color of blood. The great one, hidden for a long time in the shadows, will hold a blade in the bloody wound." Herein, Nostradamus still describes the Phoenix transit. The brother of this darkened moon is the sun, which is perfectly in accord with the ancient view that the moon was feminine and the sun masculine. The Great One is again a reference to the sun, linking this quatrain to Century 2, 41, where the great pontiff changes his abode. The Great One is the great man of Rome, pontiff, the sun. In Century 6, 6, when the night disperses, he is hidden for a long time in the shadows. The reference to a blade parallels the Genesis description of the fiery flaming sword that appeared in 3895 BC and deterred mankind from traveling back eastwards towards Eden, which was Phoenix. These quatrains, reviewed number 81, 82, 83, 84, spread throughout different centuries because of their direct relevance to our thesis. We will now review Quatrain 87 and 88. Century 1, Quatrain 87 reads, "Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city. Two great immovable powers will war for a long time. Then Arethusa will redden a new river. Nostradamus here veils his subject matter cleverly in astronomical garb. The two great immovable powers are the sun and moon, and the image of them at war describes strange sightings that will be seen from the surface of the earth, and as people gaze into the heavens, witnessing these events. It is the phoenix, blood red, that wars against the sun by darkening it, and against the moon by turning it the color of blood. Arethusa is mentioned here, a name pulled out of ancient Greek mythology, a daughter of the sea god Poseidon. Because she was turned into a perpetual spring, we see here that Nostradamus is directly referring to a flooding, the new river the prophet wrote of by this author's own personal interpretation is the Hudson River of North America. Ordinarily, Nostradamus is very specific with place names, nationalities, and geography. His reference to the new empire in Century 881 was as vague as this above reference to a new city, because these are found within passages all revealing the events of the year 2040. Then we're left to believe that the prophet was seeing an empire not known to his day and a major city not known to his day, but one that would be known worldwide by the time of the fulfillment of his prophecy. These are no doubt the United States and the city of New York, both of which are going to be ruined in 2040. We will review another quatrain involving this new city before the end of the chapter. Century 6, quatrain 88 reads, "A great kingdom will remain desolate. Near the Ebro, they will be gathered in assemblies. The Pyrenean mountains will console him when in May there will be earth tremors." Nostradamus wrote that the new empire in desolation in century 881 will be changed from the northern pole. Here he writes, "A great kingdom will remain desolate. The two are one." Proving this is found in the tributary of Philip was the country of Spain, century 881. But here we find a reference to the Ebro River, a river in Spain. This is the second reference Nostradamus makes to the month of May. Both link to earthquakes. The desolate empire, kingdom, and the Spain Ebro associations connect this passage to those of the bearded star. In fact, so insistent upon the timing of this 2040 AD series of disasters was the French seer that he mentions the month of May, the third month, this time. Century 10, quatrain 6-7 reads, "A very great troubling in the month of May. Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter and Mercury in Taurus, Venus also in Cancer, Mars in Virgo. Then hail will fall greater than an egg." With this quatrain, we better understand what is conveyed in century 6-6 concerning the bearded star. It reads, "He will appear towards the north, not far from the bearded star of Cancer." This passage mirrors the other concerning Cancer and is an astronomical description of the approach of the planet Phoenix from the north, above the sun, and on its north to south passing over the ecliptic where can be seen all of these planetary conjunctions mentioned by Nostradamus. It was the European astronomer Hoffman that in 1764 observed the Phoenix pass over the ecliptic from the north traveling south. Our final 2040 AD passage refers again to the New York City, and Erica Cheatham also believes that this is a reference to New York City. Our final 2040 AD passage refers again to the New York City, and Erica Cheatham also believes that this is a reference to New York City. Century 6, quatrain 97, we read, "The sky will burn at 45 degrees. Fire approaches the great new city. Immediately, a huge scattered flame leaps up when they want to have proof of the Normans." For reasons independent of this study, when the sun darkens provides data on why the author believes that New York City and much of the East Coast will be completely destroyed in the pole shift of 2040 AD. To find these references in the prophecies of Nostradamus merely confirms this passage connected to the reference to New York City in century 187. This passage is then linked to those all descriptive of 2040. The catastrophe of 2040 AD is not the beginning of the apocalypse, and this is why we should be worried. It is the sixth seal. As the sixth seal pole shift and transit of Phoenix will occur in 2040, a fixed time, then the events of the other seals would occur before this disaster. International wars, global plagues, epidemic and famine. Phoenix will virtually end our technological civilization of comforts, ready-made food, and sanitation, while also altering the geographical boundaries of the world as entire nations vanish and others are born out of the chaos. But this is not the end of the tragedy. 6 years later, in 2046 AD, another ancient planetary body called Nibiru by the Sumerians and known by many other archaic civilizations will nearly collide into our world and initiate a far worse series of worldwide catastrophes. The French Jewish prophet did not fail us in reporting this episode either. Employing the date index discovered by Mario Reading, we discover two quatrains that depict the horrific events of 2046. Century 2, Quatrain 2, 46. Century 2, Quatrain 46 reads, "Following one great human tragedy, a greater lies in wait. The mighty movement of the centuries begins renewal, rain, blood, milk." Famine, sword, and plague, fire will be seen in the sky with a trail of sparks. The subject of 2046 AD is fully detailed, with extensive charts and data in Anunnaki Homeworld. The seer is very adamant in revealing to us that this occurs after one great human tragedy, which is, of course, the 2040 cataclysm. Cheatham's translation has it as the great cycle of the centuries is renewed. This is only comprehended in light of the alarming prophecies of the Revelation text, the books of Enoch, and evidences in Anunnaki Homeworld revealing that Nibiru's approach and proximity will push Earth off its orbital path around the sun into a tighter orbit that shrinks the year from 365.25 days to a period of 240 days. This new orbit will initiate a new calendar or cycle of the centuries. In Century 1, Quatrain 46, we read, "Very near Ausch, Lecture and Mirand, a great fire will fall from the sky. For 3 nights, the cause will appear, both stupefying and marvelous. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake." In 2046 AD, cataclysm is not an extensive subject in the prophecies of Nostradamus. He concentrates on describing the events of 2040, and for good reason. There is a fundamental difference between these two apocalyptic destructions of the world caused by planets Phoenix and Nibiru. The first planet approaches Earth and completely ends its technologically advanced global communications network. From satellites to relay towers to the people that operate them, power grids go offline, cities vanish, new landmasses appear, and a quarter of the world's population dies. As the survivors revert back to tribalism, barbarity, and the basic instincts of survival, the second planet approaches, and it redestroys a world already in ruin. The second planetary cataclysm largely kills off 50% of humanity. 6 years after, 25% of mankind was killed. As the epicenter of pole shift rotation and being the regions left largely unaffected in 2040 and 2046 AD, Israel, Iraq, and Egypt are the most civilized areas in the world. As news of this spreads, the survivors from around the globe begin their migrations just after 2046. They will be heading towards a new kind of civilization, one ruled by a figure known in the biblical literature and in the prophecies of Nostradamus as the Antichrist. But this is the subject for another book. Before concluding this chapter, there is one additional piece of information connected to this removal of Earth from her present position orbiting the sun that was not mentioned in Anunnaki Homeworld. We know that David Davidson, an engineer, studied the complex architectural geometry of the Great Pyramid, and he came to the stunning conclusion that it encodes an astronomical chronology that ends in 2045 AD. This much was mentioned in the prior work. Davidson's research was published in 1924, but he never speculated as to what would transpire at the end of this astronomical chronology. Now, when asked about the Great Pyramid in 1932, the unusual man known as the Sleeping Prophet, the famous Edgar Cayce, in reading 5748-5 replied, "Receiving the Great Pyramid and the records from the beginning of that given by the priests to the period when there is to be a change in the earth's position." Previously, we saw how the Italian Nostradamus expert Ramadi published a work about a lost manuscript of the prophet Nostradamus and showed how it revealed that the French seer named Phoenix in a code that was linked to the year 1903. This manuscript, found in the Italian National Library, was used to decode a hidden message in Century 1, Quatrain 48, that Romulus published, as saying, "The senseless people will be reawakened by Jesus from their illusions. 6 lenses and a telescope. And I have a true key, which is even more important to pass down. I see coming in my dreams heavy legends receiving the wave of the sun. The law of the wolves is there to lay blame when it is foreseen that the whole Western world would die. I shall know different times." It has now been demonstrated that Mario Reading's date index is legitimate and supported by the independent research of this author in When the Sun Darkens and in Anunnaki Homeworld. Nostradamus focused on the terrible date of 2040, but mentioned little of 2046. He is not alone. Now we shall learn of another seer. She too long ago recorded her prophecies and placed the most emphasis on the first cataclysm, but she very specifically details them both.